Okay. Hello. Good to see you all. We are this week going to be continuing our conversation about naming. We're going to add to it relational frame theory to some degree. I want to make sure, do a quick mentor-mentee check-in, make sure that you guys are all in good shape there. I will talk a little bit of logistics for the end of the semester. Um, and yeah, that should be plenty for tonight. All right. So let's, first of all, so we have class this week, spring break the following week, and then we have 2-ish weeks, and then we're done. That's it. We're already there. It's crazy, right? So when, there's not so many of you in this class, which is good. However, I do kind of need to plan on presentations being a little bit longer, a little bit more robust. You guys are more practiced at presentations and just in general say more things at this point in the semester or in the program. So I want to be able to plan for a little bit extra time for those presentations. So when we come back, week 13, 14, or 15, I would love to start presenting. It does not matter. It's okay if your data are not complete, but I want you I want to get going with that. I obviously don't want to wait for week 15 and have 12 of you or 13 or however many of you there are try and all present in one night, because we're going to be here until midnight if we do that. And I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to present. With that being said, the content for the last 2 weeks is still really important. We definitely want to talk about observational learning and the social learning behaviors, and then to some degree the print behavior as well. So we're unlike in previous classes where we kind of shut things down in the last few weeks and just do presentations. Those classes are still going to be reserved for both presentations and content. So really, does anyone, as we sit here tonight, think that they will be in a position to present something 2 weeks from tonight? Any brave volunteers? Yeah, Clarissa?
I could present something.
Something. It's something. I will take something to start. And what we could do, this. How about this? What if we did it this way? What if in weeks 13 and 14, let's see. Wait, hang on. I need a calendar. Nope. One second. Okay. My computer is running so slow tonight. Okay, so we're out the 5th, 12th, 19th, 26th, 3rd. Okay, why don't we do this? I don't know if you're gonna like it or not. So we have 3 full weeks. We have the 12th, the 19th, and the 26th for sure. And then we have 1 more week that normally contains poster night, which we've not been able to do anything for the last couple semesters, as you know. So you guys have gotten shortchanged on poster night, which I'd love to make up for you guys. So here's what I'm thinking. Yeah, here's what I'm thinking. Over weeks 13, 14, and 15, and we'll play the end of this by ear. Everyone will present on their lit review and methods. No data. Okay? Then at the very end, week 15 and or poster night-ish, so either the 3rd or the 5th, we get together one last time and do a rapid data presentation based on our projects. If Courtney's saying okay, because I know Courtney would be the first to say, get me out of here, I don't want to do this, then I feel like the rest of you might actually be on board with that plan. What do you guys think? Yeah? Yeah? Okay.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
So week 13, 14, and 15, we will do presentations on lit review and method sections. That will also give you guys an opportunity to take feedback and be able to incorporate it into your finals. And then depending on how many we get through in week 13 and 14, we could start on week 15. If not, then we would do either Monday the 3rd or Wednesday the 5th, which is our traditional poster night, for rapid data presentations. Yeah? Okay. That's our plan. We'll see if we can stick to that. Cool. Any questions about that?
Are we also going to be presenting our poster or just the actual?
That would be in lieu of your poster.
Okay.
Yeah. You are more than welcome to throw your poster up there for the data presentation if that's what you wanted to do. All right.
I was just making sure we didn't have to do like PowerPoints, because like last semester we did poster, but then we also did like the PowerPoints for the data collection. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't an extra step.
Yeah, no. So I would anticipate doing, or not anticipate, do your PowerPoint for the lit review and methods. If you wanted to then just add your data to the PowerPoint, that would be fine. If you wanted to present your poster with all of the components, that's fine. I will, in terms of signatures, I will do it, I'll put it this way. So long as you present both your lit review and methods and your data in 2 different situations, and you complete a poster, I will sign off for the poster and poster presentation on your ranks. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. All right. Cool. Any other questions about that? Awesome. All right. Mentoring. I have one kind of hanging Chad that email that I need to get back to. And I'll ask you guys to hang on at the end of the class. Some of you know who you are. Nobody panic. But overall, how are we doing? I know we've gotten to the point where there are a few people who are not getting stuff in. I know that we've gotten to the point where there are people that are making awesome progress, and I've seen that awesome progress, and I'm really, really, really happy about it. And then everyone else is kind of falling in between. So let's start with, are there any questions related to any mentees other than those who are just not getting any work turned in? You feel good about your responses, you feel good about the quizzes, you feel good about the improvement that you're seeing. I feel better about the improvement that I'm seeing in my section of 547 in particular than I have in the past. I feel like I'm really seeing tangible change in many of the mentees' work, and I think that is awesome. I know I've given more focus to the mentor-mentee relationship in this class than I did in the past. Do you feel that visiting that every week has helped you guys kind of stay on top of things? And has how I've treated the mentorship component of this class helped you guys with it? I'm asking for a learning event here. Yeah. Anything that each of you may, that you want to tell me, yes, do this in the future, or no, don't do this in the future? Any feedback there?
I just like hearing other people say what's going on with their people, like for reference, because it's hard when you're in your own bubble.
For sure. So the opportunity to share and be a mentor cohort is helpful. Good. All right.
I mean, I guess I can go first. She's been sending me stuff every week, and I've been, but I put it out as myself to get back to her within 2 or 3 days, not even a week, just because I feel like as soon as she sends it, I'm going to forget that I opened the email, and then I'm going to forget all that stuff. So as soon as she sends it, I write it down, say, do this, check this, and then I give her feedback. But the only thing that I'm seeing is like, she'll take my feedback, but then like the next research summary or the research summaries after, it's like we're not back to square one, but it's kind of, and I'm doing the research summaries for Dr. Cohane. So Dr. Derek, you're not gonna, not Dr. Derek, Dr. Shanman, you're not gonna see that. But like her abstract was on point, like it was great, we fixed it, and that was the one thing that she improved on. But yet it's getting to the point where she's all like talking, but not saying like the ABA terminology, like independent variable, dependent variable. She's not giving me any of that terminology. That's when I go back and I feel like I'm being harsh on her, but I also want to make sure that she's putting in that terminology instead of just putting her opinion in.
Yeah, so I think, is that person in first semester Dr. Cohen's class or second?
I think second.
Okay, so with those people in particular, look, if it was a first semester person taking it now, my thought would be cut them a little bit of slack. They're not in Psych 506. They're not like fully immersed in the whole thing. For a second semester person, I don't feel that way. And I do feel that that person should be, I think the best way to say it is, as a mentor, you have to get to a point where you don't have to sign off on something until they recycle it. So you could say, like, if you have gone over the abstract every single time you get it to a good point, and you then you get the next one and you give some feedback or like whatever it is, you can say not approved. You cannot turn this in for a grade in big bold letters and let us know, like, I need to see this again. With and in that situation, you don't give feedback. You let your previous feedback carry for this. Please see the last feedback that I gave you. You see what I'm saying, Courtney? So you don't have to repeat yourself. You don't have to say the same thing over and over and over. You can just say, I already gave you this feedback, please resubmit. Because otherwise they're not learning from the correction.
Like I'm being a bully at some points, because
You
like,
don't have to say it with the tone that I just used, because I know I used a harsh tone there, but you know, you can be strict but nice.
okay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
It's just so hard because I'm such a nice person. I'm so bubbly, and I'm like, please do this right.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, many of you at some point or another have gotten an email from me or Dr. G, or a comment from one of us or Dr. Cohane, where you're just like, do it right. I already told you this. Like, it happens. But there's so much going on, and we're all extremely busy, and you're trying to produce something, like get something out. And until you meet that contingency, that there is always a balance between quality and quantity. You're going to keep doing it. You're going to keep just pushing it out at the last minute, right? Because you're buying that extra time, and you can just say, if Courtney, what I would have done, what I would do in that, what I think I would do in that situation is open it up the minute you get it. Look over those parts that you've given feedback on, and if it's no good, then shoot it back right away. Please take a look at, and I've done it where I said, please take a look at the abstract again. I have not read the rest, but this has shown me that you've not incorporated the previous feedback, and go from there. But absolutely, your expectation is that the feedback that you've given serves as a learn unit for future opportunities, 100%. And that is something that you guys are. I think this is kind of what I'm feeling. At the beginning of the semester, being a mentor for you guys is weird because you are all in school together, right? We're 11 weeks into the semester now. That dynamic shouldn't be there anymore. You are no longer student and student. You now have a mentor-mentee relationship, and you have that authority to, in a professional way, give heavy-handed corrections. Okay. And if you're not sure, send me a draft of the email that you want to send, and I'll look over it, and I'll say whether or not it's appropriate. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a really good question. It's a really good question. Because think about where you would be in 3 years in the same situation. It's not you with a peer. It's you with a line tech who's under you, and you're like, I've told you this 5 times. And now you're in authority position to let someone go or not, right? Like, that's a significant position. And you have to, this is your safe space to give someone an ultimatum of do this right, because I've told it to you before. All right. That was a big answer, but I think it's a really important one. I think it's a really, really important one. Cool. Good question. Anything else? Mentor, mentee? Yeah.
If I'm not one of the people that you're meeting with after class, can I make a request to be one of those people?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll say it. Laura and Isaac, if you guys can hang back. Laura, I think that's an excellent idea. Isaac, we have a solution to your problem that you've brought up. Okay. And then Clarissa, you can hang out. That's not a private conversation. You can be a part of that too. Okay. Cool. All right. Anything else? Yeah, Rian.
And you may have actually said this before in previous weeks,
Yeah.
but I can't remember. So is it okay if we use different research summaries from different classes, or do they need to be from the same?
I'm fine with that. I think that there's value in, or there definitely has been value in continuity between those. But the as I'm reading through the feedback on the 547 side, I've been so happy with the feedback that you guys have been giving. Turn in whatever makes the most sense for you guys at this point. I'm totally fine with that. Yeah. No,
she was kind of playing catch up a little bit, so she kind of focused more on Dr. Cohane's
Great.
subject.
Yeah.
And so I started with yours, but then I was like, oh well, I'm getting more assignments from this one. I don't know.
Yeah. That's totally fine. But you can there's value in both. There's value in both, for sure.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Good. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I just had a quick question. So I'm just getting research summaries and annotated bibliographies from my mentee. So is that okay if it's Dr. Cohen's class though? I know we went over this. I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
we went
Okay.
over that still stands. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have something else, Courtney? So you're raising your hand.
Yes. So I emailed you maybe 30 minutes ago. You probably didn't see it.
Okay, I did not see it.
But so I've only been receiving research summaries for both classes, and I've been submitting the ones I just get first, just been submitting the bottom, but I have not received any data collections. And I emailed her asking for data collections for 547 because I know that's one, but I know for Dr. Cohen, she doesn't want anyone the mentee to review it, so I haven't been receiving those, but that's fine. But I still have not received data collection 1 or 2 from my mentee to review, but she already said that she already submitted it via Moodle. So I don't know.
Okay.
Like,
I'll make an announcement in class tomorrow to make sure that I'll just say, even if you have already submitted it, please do get it to your mentor so that you can get some feedback from them as well. And we'll see what happens. Okay.
okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Awesome. Let's go ahead and switch gears, and we will start talking about naming. Continue talking about naming.
Dr. Shannon, you're gonna kill me, but I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I also emailed you. I don't know. So we have quiz 6. They have quiz 6, 7, and 8, but there's no answer key on Moodle. Is there a reason for that, or am I jumping the gun?
No, you are not jumping the gun. And I did say this way back at the beginning of the semester, but I do not expect anyone to remember it. That's a good point now. So 6, 7, and 8 are, if I'm remembering correctly, they are lower volume quizzes. They are not like the 40 question beast that those first couple of quizzes are. I want you guys giving that feedback without the keys. Okay? You are on your own for those. If you are unsure, you can run questions by me. But I want you guys to take a stab at providing feedback. Okay? You guys can do it. I promise. All right, cool. Okay, so we are going to talk about naming and relational frame theory and how they relate and what on earth they are and why these two things are significant, important, always put together, never put together. What is relational frame theory? Kind of, we'll see where the whole thing goes. Okay, so a little bit of history or backstory, and I've said some of this before, but it's worth repeating right now. So you have verbal behavior in 1950 or whatever it was, right? So we have this first discussion of verbal operands. It exists. No one really does anything with it. There is no real applied behavior analysis. So there's no working with special education children. There's no robust field of behavior analysis out there. The dominant field in the 60s are psychologists, right? Behavior analysis started under the purview of psychology and didn't develop as its own field until much later. And when verbal behavior came out, that content was not under the domain of psychologists. That was under the domain of linguists. And a man by the name of Noam Chomsky, does anyone know that name? You heard that name? Okay. Noam Chomsky was the preeminent in his field, and he led a concerted effort to discount the idea of functional verbal behavior. Language itself was formal in its characteristics. The study of it was based on its formal characteristics. The idea of function did not have a place in language and language development. So without a field to truly understand, or sorry, to truly pick up and continue studying verbal behavior from an applied perspective, and the discounting within psychology through linguistics, verbal behavior kind of sat dormant for quite a long time. In the 70s, separate from verbal behavior, so that's in the 50s. In the 70s, Murray Sidman put together a theory, not on language, but on behavior, and particularly what became known as emergent behavior with stimulus equivalence theory. All right, so stimulus equivalence theory is your cat is getting in my way. I can do it this way, I can do it this way, I can do it this way. All right, so this is our stimulus equivalence triangle. So what does any of this mean? So in stimulus equivalence, we actually have a little bit more. All right, and I'm always, hang on. Oh man. One second. It's really good. Okay, there we go. All right. So in stimulus equivalence, there are three tenets. There's the idea of the first idea is called reflexivity. And that states that basically if A equals A, then A equals A. Straightforward. It's a mathematical concept. All of these are based on mathematical concepts. 5 equals 5. All right. There is the second concept is symmetry. If A equals B, then B equals A. If 1 plus 4 equals 5, then 5 equals 1 plus 4. 1 plus 4 equals 2 plus 3. 2 plus 3 equals 1 plus 4. All right. These are significant. They seem obvious, right? But they are significant in that they establish a baseline for the things that can actually have significant meaning. All right. And that significant meaning comes from this third tenet called transitivity. 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 Yeah, there we go. All right. Transitivity is the one that we are most familiar with, which is the concept of if A equals B and A equals C, then B equals C. All right. If A equals B and A equals C, then B equals C. If 1 plus 4 equals 2 plus 3, and 1 plus 4 equals 5 plus 0, then 2 plus 3 must equal 5 plus 0. Okay? There's all these dotted lines here, and we'll get to that in a second. But what we have is 1 plus 4 equals 2 plus 3 means 2 plus 3 equals 1 plus 4. 1 plus 4 equals 5 plus 0 means 5 plus 0 equals 1 plus 4. 1 plus 4 equals 2 plus 3, or sorry, 2 plus 3 then equals 5 plus 0, and 5 plus 0 then equals 2 plus 3. So these are all mathematical relationships, right? Okay. So what does that mean when it comes to language? Why is this significant in, oops. Why is this significant? Oh, that's the issue. Whatever. I have to rewrite transitivity. I didn't want to spell it again. Transitivity. There we go. Did better that time. Okay. So first of all, what are the dotted lines? Second of all, why is this important in language? So the dotted lines are significant because they are untaught relationships. If I teach that A equals A, sorry, going the other way. If I teach that A equals A, I do not have to teach that A equals A. Now that sounds silly, but it's important. All right. If I teach that I like it the other way around. If I teach that A equals B, I should not have to teach that B equals A. Similarly, if I teach that A equals B, and therefore B equals A, and that A equals C, and therefore C equals A, I do not have to teach that B equals C, rather it can simply be derived from the relationship. Why is this so significant in terms of behavior? This is a test of a basic principle. This is not an easy question. Why is the idea of untaught relationships so significant?
Is it regarding generalization in that, like, if one stimulus is functioning as a reinforcer, then other stimulus in that same class may also function as a reinforcer?
Let's come back to that.
Okay.
Anne, what were you going to say?
It's probably wrong, but
Probably, but that's okay. I want you guys to try.
okay. Is it because that way you don't have to do direct teaching each time?
What's the significance of that? Yes, that is there, but that the reason that's significant is based on something else. And Clarissa, same thing. What you're saying is true, but the reason that's significant is based on something else. This is one of those questions that I guarantee you guys are overthinking. But it's really hard because the significance is so basic. In order for behavior to occur, what must have happened? In order for there to be behavior, what must have happened with that behavior? What is the most basic principle you guys can think of? Laura, I think you mouthed it.
I said reinforcement, but I'm scared.
Positive reinforcement. In order for a behavior to occur, that behavior must contact positive reinforcement. We are talking about the emergence of a behavior that has not contacted positive reinforcement. How can that be? How can that be? The significance of untaught behaviors is that these behaviors occur without contacting direct contingencies. When this came out, the idea of an untaught behavior being seen was radical. It was extremely radical. Right? The whole premise of radical behaviorism is that positive reinforcement exists for every behavior that we see. And this says, but where is it? All right. What develops from here is this idea of equivalence classes. And Clarissa, this is what I think you were getting at, right? So you have this idea of classes of stimuli becoming equivalent such that equivalent classes can be or equivalent stimuli within the class can be reinforced as a class. So no longer, so long as the relationship has been established, A equals B, context reinforcement, A equals C, reinforcement, all three members are now within the same equivalence class, we can have these untaught relationships emerge. And they can be functionally equivalent. All right, so where then does this matter on a practical side? Now, all of a sudden, we have a way, or better yet, to explain the equivalence of untaught relations. I teach that, should do it the other way, that this grapheme makes the sound a. And from that, I can say that a is represented by this grapheme. I teach that this grapheme says the sound a, and I can derive that this sound represents this grapheme. Then without any direct teaching, I know that these graphemes are equal. I've just taught the equivalence of two letters based on their relationship with a letter sound. How do you test something like this? How do you test something like that? Anyone know? Anyone done a stimulus equivalence test before? So I could have that field and say, point to a, right? I could have that field and say, point to a, and reinforce it and correct it. I could have this and say, what sound does it make? Child says a, and I correct and reinforce it. And I can have this and say, what sound does it make? Correct and reinforce it. What does that sound like? Unmute yourself, Clarissa, so everyone can hear you loud and clear.
But is it right?
Yes.
Multiple exemplar instruction?
MEI. All right. But I've done an MEI for this, not this. So through MEI, I've established that A equals B and B equals A equals C and C equals A. How do I test, does B equal C? How would I test that? What? I think you got it. I'm becoming a better lip reader. Unmute yourself.
Does it match?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I put this field out. I give this exemplar, and I say either match or match a with a. And because they've been established here, I say this says a, this says not a, this says not a, this says a. I match, and all of a sudden, I have a behavior that is correct, unequivocally correct, that has never contacted reinforcement. That sounds so basic to us, but that shift is huge. We can now look at this wider range of behaviors that no longer require direct reinforcement. Okay, so now let's move forward. Stimulus equivalence ends up having a very robust line of research. I stole a book from one of my professors on all that is like an anthology basically of all the Murray-Sidman equivalent studies that were done in the 70s and 80s. It's like 200 pages, 250 pages thick. It's a big book on just stimulus equivalent studies. So whereas verbal behavior had virtually no research, stimulus equivalents got a ton of research because it was so easily verifiable. It was in a different purview, didn't really apply to language. It was its own thing, and it gained a lot of steam. All right, so now let's fast forward into the 80s. In the 80s, we start to get some really significant applied behavior analysis, right? So Java starts to move out of the world of pigeons and rats and into the world of, I mean, it had been dealing with children with developmental delays since the 70s or so, but it really gained steam, particularly with Ivar Lovaas and the publication of his method. So the Lovaas method, which actually ends up giving behavior analysis a bad name for later on because of the discrete trial method that it used. But it was the first time that children with autism had ever been taught things systematically. So that, I mean, that was really, really, really significant. Once there is this movement towards teaching kids that have these significant delays new behaviors, there is now a means by which we can start to test functional verbal behavior. If I can teach, so what do you guys think the first verbal operants that were taught were?
Man.
Man, absolutely, right? You have these strong EOs, it's one word, it's the obvious place for a reinforcement-based system of language to be tested. If I can point, I can speak. If I can use reinforcement to maintain and increase pointing, I can use reinforcement to maintain and increase speaking. Boom, you have a functional vocal operant. All right, so mans start to get tested. And we start to see research on mans and man training. Once you open that door and you have a field that understands and is capable of bursting into that room, we start to see an increase in research on tax, on autoclitics. The idea of the conversational unit is developed. That all happens in the late 80s and early 90s. All right, so then into the 90s, we get to 1996 and the concept of naming theory. All right. Naming theory really set out to, it touches on, it speaks to stimulus equivalence. It speaks to the idea that had been kind of put out there of what's called at the time derived relational responding, which was not fully developed yet, but was put out there as a concept. And it speaks to the idea of verbal behavior. And there's like 5 pages within the Horn and Low paper that's dedicated to the relationship between naming, there we go, relationship between naming, stimulus equivalence, and derived relational responding. And their point was that it was all of these things. When we talk about naming, we talk about classes of equivalent behaviors being created out of experiences. That's directly derived from stimulus equivalence theory, right? the relational component to it, it almost, it's talking about the relational component, I believe, in terms of reinforcement, not in terms of the stimuli themselves. All right. So there was this understanding that it was there, but there wasn't this fully developed idea of how naming and derived relational responding fit together. All right. Fast forward a couple of years, people start to go back and forth on yes naming, no naming, yes naming, no naming, yes naming, no naming. In 2000, the derived relational response theorists put out this book on derived relational responding and relational frame theory. This was a direct response to naming theory. All right. As an alternative to that, they built on stimulus equivalence and said, what we are about to talk about is what verbal behavior should actually be defined as. Not the things that Skinner is talking about, but the process that we are using to teach new language should define verbal behavior. All right. So what is relational frame theory? And how does it relate to stimulus equivalence? So in relational frame theory, A equals A doesn't matter. They are the same thing. That is a given relationship. There's nothing to derive from that. All right. A, though, is related to B. Therefore, I should probably do it this way. B is related to A. All right. Why is that significant? Why is that change significant? Equivalence, stimulus equivalence, is focused on only one thing: equal classes. Not all classes are equal. All right. Stimulus equivalence says if 2 plus 3 equals 1 plus 4, then 1 plus 4 equals 2 plus 3. That's all it can do. What relational frame theory says is 2 plus 3 does not equal 2 plus 4. Therefore, 2 plus 4 does not equal 2 plus 3. We can start to understand non-reinforced emergent relations based on inequality or other types of relations, temporal relations, size relations, and we'll get to the next one in a little bit. All right. So we have, there we go. Same concept. A is related to B. Therefore, B is related to A. Same thing. Squiggly line is related to. B is related to C. A is related to B, A is related to C, C is related to B, and vice versa. All right. So far, that should make sense. If A is not equal to B, and A is equal to C, B is not equal to C. Those relationships exist. All right. Then, where it gets really cool is in this thing called transformation of stimulus function. All right. B and C are related. All right. B has a function based on this relationship and this relationship. C has a function. Now notice this is A and this is A1. Which are not our typical A's. Look at that for a second. B is related to C. B has a function, A. Based on that function and this relationship, C has a function. Cats are playing in the background, sorry. What does that mean? Person 1, person 2. All right, I see person 1 and person 2 as equal. All right, they go together. I like person 1. Without meeting person 2, how do I feel about person 2? I like that. Person 1 and person 2 are not equal. I like person 1. How do I feel about person 2? I don't like them. How many of you have judged a person based on your friend's opinion of them? That's this. That's transformation of stimulus function. Where is this significant? This, to me, is complex conditioning. When you show up a place for the first time, and it is already conditioned as a reinforcer or a punisher, it's because of all of your the transformation of stimulus function from all of the stimuli in that environment that you have a history with. All right. Transformation of stimulus function is an insanely powerful tool. Now, they go on and talk about all sorts of different things and all sorts of different relationships, and they establish operant histories with that. They establish that each of these types of relationships can be operant. They can be taught. They are controlled by reinforcement. And the field totally of ABA totally falls in love with this. When I joined, when I started in behavior analysis in 2006, the first conference I went to was in 2008. So this is 6 years after the book and subsequent studies had been published. They'd been doing the research before that, but the 2000 book really set the whole thing going. You could not get a room or a seat in a room that had a lecture on relational frame theory. Everyone wanted to hear people who knew about relational frame theory talk about it. One, the people that developed it were Irish, so the talks were incredibly entertaining, and you had all these great accents. So that helped the cause through transformation of stimulus function. That may have helped the content, but it was fascinating to take all of these ideas that we had before and see a brand new light shed on them that totally made sense, right? Okay, yeah, I absolutely buy that I can learn things if A is taller than B and B is taller than C, C is taller than A, right? That's the second one that I had. All right, combinatorial entailment. That's what I was looking for. Mutual entailment and combinatorial entailment. They had these crazy terms that no one knew what the hell they were talking about. But what was really radical about what they were talking about was, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but in the text, they said that a verbal operant is any untaught behavior that is seen the first time. The first time novel behavior emerges, it is a verbal operant. As soon as it is reinforced, it is no longer verbal. I am not going to sit here and defend that position. I'm not. I think that they made this claim that was esoteric in nature, that didn't, you can't prove that something is or is not verbal behavior by definition if you're redefining it. Like that, just didn't, the route that they went down didn't make sense to me. Someone else may be able to actually argue me on that and win. Like I'm not going to say that I'm the most expert on why it's a stupid argument, but I think it is. I think it's unnecessary. All right. The concept of derived relational responding is a huge contribution to the field. The argument of whether a derived relational response is a verbal response and is the only type of verbal response, I think is academic and pointless and doesn't help anybody. But what that did was it took the naming paper, which was arguing that this is what kind of verbal is based off of, because once you can do this, you can have social contact. It's the proof that you have social contact, right? Because you've learned without those without directly being taught. So therefore, you had to be contacting reinforcement from the behavior another, which is verbal, right? Mediated by a listener. And it's saying, that's stupid. This is verbal behavior. It's a useless argument to me. And what it, so sorry. back to my timeline, and I hope you'll see why it becomes important. Between 1996 and 2001, there was a lot of academic argument or discussion about the significance of naming theory. In 2000, relational frame theorists published their book. In 2001, the naming theorists come out with their first data showing that naming is a thing, there are 5 papers published between 2001 and 2005 or 6 by Horn and Low and colleagues, naming and categorization. If you haven't looked at those papers, you really should. I believe there's 5, there might be 6, I'm pretty sure there's 5, that are the first data related to naming. As we will see now, or as we see now, their data support the idea of listener behavior to speaker behavior. Equivalence, there's that word, right? Listener equals speaker, speaker equals listener, and that you can categorize behaviors based on the equivalence of those two things. What Dr. Greer originally set out to study, everyone was calling it naming, but he was looking at what Horn and Low described as that novel first behavior in their paper, the incidental language acquisition. What we now have as 2 different ideas, and I didn't talk enough about this last week, but we have incidental language acquisition as full naming, BIN, and we have listener to speaker and or speaker to listener as unidirectional naming. We have 2 different ideas now. Horn and Low talks about them both, but they only test one. The data that support that occur from 2001 to 2004, 5 or 6, whatever it is, right? Think of that timeline that I was just describing. That was right in the time frame when you could not get a seat in a relational frame theory talk. So those data kind of got wiped out in terms of significance within the field. Everyone was obsessed with relational frame theory, just as the naming data were coming out. You guys all know that I love Dr. Greer. I am more than happy to be critical of his work where I think it has holes and needs to be fixed. And someday I want to help be a part of fixing that, because I think the concept is beyond brilliant, right? Credit where credit is due, and I will happily give him this credit. Right from the start, he said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're doing naming theory or relational frame theory, who does what or which is, it doesn't matter. What matters is, are children learning new language? And if so, why? So in 2005, when he published his first naming paper, I don't want to say it got lost, but it wasn't what it is today. But then he did another, and another, and another, and another. And 50 papers later, the Cabas Research Group has this robust understanding of naming. Simultaneous to that, relational frame theorists move in a new direction. They start studying something totally different, unrelated to verbal behavior, unrelated to verbal operants, unrelated to the stir that they caused in the early 2000s. And you're left with this amazingly robust line of research on naming out of Columbia. And there are some other significant authors, namely Caio Miguel, that pick up on the naming research. If you've read some naming papers, you've probably come across that name. And in the past few years, it started to generate more interest because there's this space for it. All right. You go to more conferences now, and you can still get a room or a seat in a room where Dr. Greer is talking about naming. But more and more, you're hearing people come out of those talks saying, oh my God, I need that. That's what my kid's missing. Now, it's part of it's because of the way he talks about it. He's amazing. If you haven't seen him talk on naming, it's amazing to listen to, and he speaks with it with such passion. But it's starting to get to the point where there is more and more research on it, and that's so important because, as we've found out in the past 5 years, or not found out, accepted in the past 5 years, there is so bloody much about naming that we don't know. And we need people questioning it. We need people replicating it. We need people going out and saying, MEI doesn't work all the time. Why? What's missing in my kid, or what am I doing wrong that is preventing it from working? We're starting to get that. Sarah Lechargo, I can't remember if it's Lechargo or Lechago. I think it's Lechargo in North Texas, has published a couple of papers that are very, very critical of MEI. Very critical of the relationship between listener and speaker. Anna Petersdottir, who is a big supporter of Dr. Greer, has done some similar types of things. Emma Hawkins and our very own Dr. Grant Gotro published a paper where MEI was not successful and where the probes were. So now we have all these questions as to what is going on here. No one is doubting that there is a set of kids that MEI was successful for. But we're now in this realm where we can start to ask, but what about everyone else? And I think the what about everyone else is where ideas like relational frame theory live. There are ideas where observing responses and conditioned reinforcement and these conditioned responses live. MEI is for the kid that has everything, just need a little push. But a lot of the kids that we work with need a lot more than that. I think when you talk about the relationship between naming and relational frame theory, so really quickly, because it's 8:10 almost, all of this is to say that naming and relational frame, I think, are tangentially related, but they are not linked inextricably. When you hear them together, I don't think that there is this confusing intertwining between the two. Where you get the understanding of the debate now is that there's probably a relationship that's hierarchical, where either you need naming in order to emit derived relations, or you need derived relations in order to acquire naming. We don't know that order, but that probably exists. It might be chicken and egg, because naming might be a derived relation. All right. So your guys' challenge as you move forward as behavior analysts with a CABIS background and that level of understanding is to challenge yourself to read on naming, to read on relational frame theory, to understand where the links might be between those two and apply them. The significance that each one holds, whether one's better than the other or different or more important or whatever, that's an academic question. But there are real world implications for being able to demonstrate naming, or what I would argue is omit naming behaviors, and being able to omit derived relational responses. And when kids can't do that, Isaac, the research that you're doing, I think has a lot to do with derived relational responses. Let's see, who else? Christine, I think yours has, if we find the unexpected, that has to do with transformation of stimulus function, right? I can't go through everyone's research, too much going on. But it's that these touch on so many of the different projects that we're looking at, even without studying them directly. All right. Again, the reason why we stayed away from naming projects this semester is because there's just too much we don't understand about it. We can't just say, I did my naming probe, my child doesn't have naming, I'm going to do MEI, and now they're going to have naming. That doesn't work for everybody. We have to figure out why. And that's going to take longer than one semester. All right. Cool. The reason we don't discover or read in and study on relational frame theory in this class is because it's not something you can cover in 1 week. They have their own verbal behavior. It takes a lot of time to study it and understand it and know what the hell they're talking about. It's good stuff though. It can really, really help us understand how we do acquire complex language, how we do acquire complex interpersonal behavior. The primary output of relational frame theory has been based on this idea of transformation of stimulus function. And it's therapy. It's like, I feel a certain way, I'm depressed, I need to talk to someone. There's a practice called acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, that is based on relational frame theory. And it is its own basically cognitive behavioral therapy based on ABA rules and principles. It's really cool. It's really cool. And like I said, they've given up on the naming battle, right? And finally the field kind of has too. But it's all there and it's all good and it's all meaningful, and we can do some really great things with it. And if you have kids that are on the cusp of, that have naming, that are on the cusp of some really advanced language, this type of training is very powerful. It's very, very powerful. There is finally, I didn't say this before. There is really a more applied usage of relational frame theory as it relates to the kiddos that we are working with. And Mark Dixon, D-I-X-O-N, put out, has an assessment and intervention and treatment called the PEAK, P-E-A-K. If you've heard of that, that is using relational responding techniques to do a lot of the things that we do. and it is in many ways related to VBDA, but it's looking, instead of looking at mans and tax, it's looking at relational operands. And I think that's really cool. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think one's verbal or not verbal. I think they go together. That's fantastic. That's what we should be doing. All right. That's as close as I can get to a doctoral level lecture on advanced verbal behavior. And it's a great place to leave you guys before spring break. I hope you enjoyed that. I know there's a little history of verbal behavior that may or may not be relevant or meaningful to you guys, but I think it's interesting, and I think it's good to know the context of all these concepts and theories. It's hard sometimes when you're a student and you hear of all these things. I don't think I said any major things that were new to any of you guys tonight, but you don't know where they land. You don't know how, which was first, who did what, why is this here, why didn't they do that first? I think the historical context of the development of these things can help us understand why we use some things, don't use others, and get wherever we get. All right. I'm not even going to take questions because I don't even think it's worth it right now. You guys are fried. I can see it. But we can definitely come back to it. If you have questions, shoot me an email, and I'll definitely be able to type up bigger and better responses than whatever I'm going to give you here tonight. So are there any questions? All right, good. Happy to follow up with any of you on any things I talked about. I can send you guys readings if you want. This is really like a bonus piece that I think is important to discuss, but is not critical to taking the test or passing this class or any of the things that you guys are doing, but I think it's good to know. All right. Clarissa, Isaac, and Laura, if you don't mind hanging out. If anyone else has any other questions, you're also more than welcome to. Otherwise, shoot me an email if you need anything. And when we come back, let's get some presentations. Okay? All right. Have a good one, guys. I'll talk to you later.